All right. Hello, everyone. I just want to let you know I'm having some intermittent connectivity issues tonight. So if I go black, we'll be right back with you in just a minute or two. So welcome to the January 25th episode of PubTalk Live, the live publishing talk show airing the second and fourth Saturday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm your host, Sarah Nicolas. I'm a young adult author, current managing director of Pitch Wars, and a library event planner. You can subscribe to reminders via email by clicking on the link in the description so you don't miss a show. You can also follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at PubTalk Live. And if you'd like to support the show, you can find a link to the Patreon near the end of the video's description down below. And I'm going to bring on tonight's guest co-host. S-Jae-Jones, called Jae-Jae, is an artist, adrenaline junkie, and New York Times bestselling author of Winter Song and Shadow Song. Jae-Jae is a Southern California native. She now resides in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where she is learning how to deal with real winter. Welcome to the show, Jae-Jae.
Hello, how's it going, everybody?
Hi. Well, I'm having those connectivity issues, so that's a thing.
Oh no, I mean I can see you okay. I don't know if you can see me okay or anything like that.
We'll just cross our fingers that it doesn't happen again. So oh gosh, sorry. I'm trying to type and it's not working. Okay. So let's see. We have Heather is here. Hey, Heather. Thank you. I think I missed you last. Did I miss you last episode? Were you not here? I remember thinking I talked about the audio of the book of the week, and Ebony didn't say I'm going to add that to my TBR, and I was like, "Where's Ebony at?" And then Kelly is also here. Hello, Kelly. Thanks for joining us tonight. So I will say I ran a writers' conference today, a 7 hours. Writers' conference, so I'm exhausted.
Well, is it just me? Because I feel like Sarah just kind of left the chat. So if it's just me and you guys can't hear her, just kind of let me know somehow, somewhere. Because
All right, JJ,
there you are again.
You're running the show now.
Okay, awesome.
All right, so Heather said I had to miss the last show. We missed you. Ebony, I wasn't here. Oh, you were sick? I'm so sorry, Ebony. I hope you feel better. All right. So, yeah, we're going to jump right in. So the viewer poll this week is a throwback to the last episode with Fran Wild and Rachel Hartman. We spent a lot of time talking about which element of fiction you start when you start writing a story. And so that's the poll, is which element of fiction. And so if you haven't voted on that, I just dropped the link in the YouTube chat. So make sure you go and vote on that if you haven't yet. So the 4 that I put up are plot, character, setting, and theme. And we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. We're going to jump right into news items. This one is a big one. There's a lot.
Yes.
So in case you've been living under a rock in the publishing industry, Janine Cummins' novel American Dirt released on Tuesday. It was also chosen as Oprah's latest book club pick. The book is about a middle-class Mexican bookseller who flees Mexico with her 8-year-old son after a drug cartel kills her husband. Since the release, there's been an online called it harmful, appropriating, inaccurate, trauma porn melodrama. This book was a result of a 9-house auction, 7-figure advance, and an attached movie deal. And the afterward, the author even wrote, "I wished someone slightly browner than me would write it." In May, there was a promo party for the book that featured floral arrangements wrapped in barbed wire, and the author All right, I am so sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on. But I'm actually trying to set up my hotspot on my phone, so if it happens again, I can do that, connect that way. Because I do have free hotspot. I've just never used it.
Yeah.
So if I disconnect again, I'm going to connect via my phone, and hopefully that will help. Yeah, so people said that decorate. Activate the hotspot while JJ introduces the next item. Unless you had something to talk about American Dirt. I don't know if you had any comments on that.
Well, to be honest, I don't think I could say anything that more informed and or people with real personal ties to the controversy have to say, except when I saw who the publisher was, I basically said I am not surprised. Yeah, so if you guys don't know, the person who acquired American Dirt was a person named Amy Einhorn, who was also pretty well known for having edited The Help. So I saw that and kind of went, this is a pattern and not surprising. So that's kind of really my only additional thing to add to that news item. So, all right, are you connected? Are we good? I still see you kind of hopping in and out. Everyone let me know if I'm just talking into a void. All right, are you here?
All right, can y'all hear me now?
Okay. I can hear you.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Okay, I'm connected to the hotspot, so hopefully, again, let's all cross our fingers.
Okay.
And after this, I'll be calling me. All right, where were we at?
All right. Well, I just made my point about the editor of The Help and how this is a pattern, and I really
is it the same
was
editor?
I was disappointed but unsurprised.
Oh.
Sorry?
Was it the same editor?
As The Help. It's the same person who edited The Help.
Oh, okay. Oh,
yeah.
Got it.
Disappointed but unsurprised is basically the prevailing mood. So, but yeah, that's kind of, everyone else who's spoken up about this, particularly all the Latinx voices, is probably much more important to listen to than mine. But if we're done with American Dirt, we can move on to the next news item, which is Jason Reynolds became the 7th National Ambassador for Young People's Literature last week. He'll serve for 2 years and says he plans to use his time to encourage kids to tell their own stories, which is really incredibly well-deserved, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm a big fan of Jason's. When I saw this announcement, I was like, that's a perfect choice.
Yeah.
Yes. And I also thought really interesting. Like you can click through. We're gonna, by the way, for everyone who hasn't seen the show before, I'll share all the links to all the articles we're talking about in the description later tonight, and so you can click through and read more information about the different things we're talking about. And if you article, I just thought it was really cool. Kids, I don't want to tell kids to read; they're told to read all the time. I want to ask them what their stories are. I just thought that was really great.
All right.
Okay, so the success of the Witcher Netflix series has Orbit Books printing 500,000 new copies of the books. Book sales spiked since the release of the show on December 20th, and the publishers had to scramble to make books available to readers. With a second season already announced, sales will only rise. Did you watch The Witcher, JJ?
Yeah, I did. I did not. I hadn't known that they were actually based on books because my experience of The Witcher was the video games.
Mm-hmm.
So, and frankly, I wasn't. I mean, I do love RPGs. You know, very sort of story-based, narrative-based RPGs, of which The Witcher is one. But I remember kind of playing the first game and just being sort of thrown off by how much sex was in it. And not that I have problems with sex in video games, but it was just like, that was not what I was expecting initially. But I probably will return to those and probably will read the books as well. I really enjoyed it. Barring the fact that I don't think Henry Cavill has any charisma. But everything else I thought was great.
Yeah, I saw you tweeting about that. I was like, oh, you're gonna make people mad. People love him.
You know what? I think people are distracted by the fact that he has very nice thighs, apparently. That does nothing for me. I'm an ace person, so it's kind of like, that's great. He's just, I don't know. I forget what he looks like even as I'm looking at him.
Yeah. The show, the whole like conversation around the show cracks me up because there are so many people who are like, well, it's not like great storytelling or it's not like a great show, but they still love it anyway. And so I just think that's really interesting. And people are like, oh, it's not great. I love it. And it's fun, you know?
Yeah, well, I would it's not like prestige television necessarily, but it knows exactly what it is and it executes that very, very well. And I don't think that it's necessarily a bad show because of that, but it surely, just because it doesn't set out to be highbrow necessarily doesn't mean that it's not a good show, or craft wise it's bad, because I actually think craft wise it's pretty well executed. So
yeah. Just that song keeps getting stuck in everyone's head.
I love it. I sing it all the time.
Yeah.
All right, so we can move on to the next news item, which says, last week, men claiming to be from Pakistan's Inter Services Intelligence Agency confiscated 250 copies of the Urdu translation of A Case of Exploding Mangoes from the publisher and demanded to know which bookshops were selling it. It was originally published in 2008 in English, and it satirizes a late Pakistani dictator and was long listed for the Man Booker Prize. The raid came days after author Muhammad Hanif was informed that he was being sued for defamation by Zia's son. So... yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot. I was in Pakistan and he was talking about it on Twitter. Like I saw a couple people talking about it, but I didn't. I didn't see it a lot of places, But I mean, it's indicative of like the climate in the country, So, but yeah, when the government comes and seizes your book, that's a bit scary.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to some happy news. Someone's singing "Toss a Coin to Your Witcher" in the comments.
Of course they are.
Yeah. Info from their poll about Americans' leisure activities. You may have seen the news going around that visiting the library is the most popular activity on the survey, with average per year nearly double the rate of visiting a movie theater, which was the next most popular activity. In addition, they found that women visit the library twice as much as men do, but it's still the most popular activity for men. And usage tends to decline in the 30s to the 60s, but increases again after age 65. Unsurprisingly, adults in low-income households visit more than those from high-income households. And another thing I saw that I found interesting, because a lot of people think about like the library as a place you go with your kids, is whether or not a person had kids didn't have really an effect on how often they visited.
All right. I mean, granted, I haven't actually been to a library that wasn't for work reasons in a long time, like physically set foot in the library. Although I do actually borrow a lot of books on my e-reader because I'm lazy and I don't like to leave my house. But I think that's great. And my fondest memories as a child is going to the library a lot. Just hold on one second. I'm going to tell everybody to shut up.
Okay. Yeah, for anyone who's watching and doesn't know, I work at a library, so I'm there 5 days a week. But I don't know if that counts if I'm being paid to be there. But
apologies.
No problem. No problem. So the writers conference I was talking about that I hosted today was at the library. And so I think there are a lot of events that people don't realize are being hosted at libraries as well. So that's my job, but I think we do a lot of really cool things. So
I think it's great because there's a lot of community outreach that happens from a library. That I remember when I was a kid, I used to go to the library twice a week. My mom would take me on Tuesdays and my dad would take me on Saturdays. And there were a lot of activities that were beyond just books. If I remember, they had other things going on. So that's really wonderful resource too. So that's good to know, because nowadays whatever movie comes out, you're spending $15 just to sit in a seat for like 2.5 hours, and everything to me seems kind of the same. So there's not a lot of movies these days that really compel me to go anymore.
Well, you have some like not so great library news for us to follow up.
Yes. So it says a horrific proposed law in Missouri could put librarians in jail if they refuse to censor books. Under the law, panels of parents would be elected to evaluate whether books are appropriate for children. Libraries that allowed minors access to the books the panel finds unsuitable would be defunded, and librarians would be fined or imprisoned for up to a year. Many people are rightly worried this would disproportionately affect LGBTQ books and books that help children and teens cope with and understand sexual assault. This is an actual form of like actual censorship. When people often talk about censorship, it's really the government cannot jail you for, freedom of speech. And this really, I feel like, would be violating that, or am I just interpreting the Constitution incorrectly here?
I mean, I'm no constitutional scholar, but yeah. But Missouri, we've seen a lot of like really big book challenges come out of Missouri the last couple of years. So it's not surprising to me that it happens in Missouri. Ebony, I live in Missouri. I'm sorry, Ebony. I was born in Missouri. Yeah. Yeah, I was born in Missouri, so I'm not terribly surprised, but also really disappointed. And hopefully this doesn't make it any further.
Right.
Yeah, because it's not passed yet or anything, but it's a proposed law. Ebony had asked, Sarah, are libraries more busy during tax season? A lot of libraries offer some kind of tax help. So I know at my library, we partner with AARP, and they do for several weeks, like times where you can come in and get advice from them and ask them questions and stuff. We do have the tax forms at the library, but like the actual library staff aren't trained in any way to help people with taxes, even though people ask, because if you're a librarian, you get asked to do all kinds of things. But yeah, so we do see a little bit more because we have those classes. Oh, all right. So this story is like kind of weird because it's two stories that happen within 3 days of each other. So on January 14th, it was announced that the Jack Reacher series is getting a new adaptation, and this time it's going to be a series for Amazon. And on January 17th, 3 days later, Lee Child announced that his brother, Andrew Grant, would be taking over for writing the books, but he has to write under the name Andrew Child. And I just thought it was like such a weird combination of things to happen at the same time around the Jack Reacher series. And
Yeah, I guess
I can't see how they would be connected.
they're probably not. I'm sure that the rights were, sold years and years ago, and they're getting around to adapting it. And I mean, Lee Child has been writing the Jack Reacher books for a very, very long time. So I'm sure these things are just happening separately, but I don't think the PR camps necessarily coordinated it.
Yeah.
Because the studios would have their own sort of PR, and the publishing houses obviously have their own publicity departments, and there was probably no communication there. There isn't always a lot of great communication between Hollywood and publishing to begin with, so I think that's just a sort of unfortunate timing here.
Yeah. Yeah, because I saw the first one and then I saw the second one right after, and I was like, like each on their own, I probably wouldn't have noticed, but like when they both happen, I was like, that's weird. Yeah.
All right, so the next news item is there's a new comic coming out to celebrate the 90th anniversary of Nancy Drew, in which she dies, and the Hardy Boys are the ones to investigate.
So, what? Why? Like, why? I'm sure there's some kind of like twist, and Nancy Drew is not actually dead, but like,
it still centers the Hardy Boys.
Yeah.
In the 90th anniversary of Nancy Drew, which I don't know who makes this decision, and it's a comic, so it's not the state of Carolyn Keene, I guess, like directly. I think they still write Nancy Drew books. Granted, I haven't read a Nancy Drew book since I was like maybe 9 or 10, but I don't know who made that decision. It was a dumb decision.
Yeah. I had to read it like 3 times. I was like, what? That's okay. Sounds like a Hardy Boys book to me.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, the comic is part of a series that's like Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew together, but still, if you're gonna celebrate a character, probably don't kill them and
kill her off. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and other news, book news that made people angry. If you weren't aware, there's a new Hunger Games book coming out in May called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and it is set 64 years earlier than the first book. And this past week, Entertainment Weekly revealed an excerpt, and that the main character will be an 18-year-old President Snow. Obviously, he's not president then. Calling him a teenage born to privilege, but searching for something more friendly, charming, and a hero.
I have no interest in this book.
Yeah. How do you feel about, them kind of romanticizing and making sympathetic a vicious dictator? Like,
frankly, I do think Suzanne Collins is not going to be the kind of person to romanticize Snow. Based on her other books, Gregor the Overlander series, and the Hunger Games in general, I don't think she's that kind of writer, but I am still uninterested in Snow's point of view.
Yeah.
I just don't care. Like, it just doesn't interest me to begin with. And I'm kind of doubly disappointed because, when I heard initially that it was set 64 years earlier than the Hunger Games, I was like, kind of like counting, and I was like that gif of that woman with like all the calculations in front of her face. But I thought it was going to be Mags's book.
Yeah, I did too.
And I was actually really excited about that. But and then this dropped, and I was like, nah, all right. And my interest just completely disappeared. So I do think better of Suzanne Collins. I don't think that she would be I don't think she would romanticize, you know. I just don't. But at the same time, it's not a choice I would have made. I don't. The other question if I were Suzanne Collins, is the question I would have asked is, does this story really need to be told? And does it need to be told right now? And I think the answer to both is no. So it just kind of makes it feel a little bit cheap to me. But obviously, maybe she really does have something she wants to say there. It's just that I personally not interested in it anymore.
Yeah, I'm definitely not gonna I'll keep my kind of eyes and ears open, but I'm definitely not gonna be one of the early adopters, you know?
No, I was an intern in publishing when the first Hunger books came out. And I recall physically hand selling 25 copies of the Hunger Games to people when it first came out. And I got an arc from BEA of Catching Fire. And I remember this because I'd read it back in June or something. And then I was dying because it was another year and a half before Mockingjay. So I did love the series, and I really do love the books, and I do think highly of Suzanne Collins because the thing that she does the least expected thing in every book, and that I think takes some real skill, because in book 2 you just assume that Katniss doesn't go back. You take for granted Katniss won't go back into the games, and she does. And then in Mockingjay, the thing that you do take for granted is Peeta's love for Katniss, and then she takes that away too. So I do think that as a storyteller, she's not going to go any sort of expected route. But again, I really just don't care about snow.
Yeah.
All right. So next news item, if we have time. The National Endowment for the Arts, or NEA, has announced 60 fellowships awarded to writers for a total of $1.2 million for 2020. They received nearly 1,700 applications for the 36 creative writing fellowships for $25,000 each. The remaining 24 fellowships are for literature translation and grant the recipient $12,500 each. So, that sounds pretty good.
It's always good to hear writers getting money. I'm a fan of that.
It's also nice to hear about translators getting paid as well, because my mother is a Korean and English interpreter, and even she doesn't translate for English to Korean or Korean to English, because that's almost an art form as much as writing itself. So yeah,
definitely. Actually, Micah Dean Hicks, who's a local writer, he was one of he received one of the fellowships this time around. And he taught at our writers' conference today, so it all comes around full circle.
Oh.
All right, we're going to go ahead and bring on our special guest for the evening. Patrice Caldwell is a graduate of Wellesley College and the founder and fundraising chair of People of Color in Publishing, a grassroots organization dedicated to supporting, empowering, and uplifting racially and ethnically marginalized members of the book publishing industry. Born and raised in Texas, Patrice was a children's book editor before shifting to be a literary agent at Howard Moorheim Literary Agency. I really hope I said that last name right. Her anthology, A Phoenix First Must Burn, 16 stories of Black girl magic, resistance, and hope, is out on March 10th. So please welcome to the show, Patrice Caldwell. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome. How are you doing? Are you in Texas?
No, yes, I am. I was supposed to say no.
Okay. So it's probably a little bit warmer there than where JJ is, huh?
JJ, where are you? You're in
Pittsburgh now.
No, whoa, oh God.
I know. Well, no, we moved up from North Carolina in June.
Oh, okay. Wait, why did you move? Now I'm asking everyone's there.
No, it's fine. No, my partner is a doctor, and he's doing his fellowship here, which is why we moved.
Do you like it better, or?
Well, North Carolina, I mean, I was there for 6 years, so I have, a lot of friends down there still, and just, kind of real comfort and community. But I really like it up here a lot as well. It's a bigger city than when I was before, and at least the neighborhood that I'm in is walkable, which is, I haven't been able to do that since I moved out of New York City.
Yeah. I feel that.
But yeah, but it is bitterly cold, and
Yeah.
I'm born and raised in LA, and I hate anything under 75 degrees is
Yep.
sweatshirt weather.
Yep. No, so I'm born and raised in Texas, and I lived in New York when I worked in publishing. Well, I still work in publishing, but then I became a literary agent, and I was like, goodbye, because I was like, oh, I actually hate this a lot, and it is the same thing where like I have a lot of friends there, but I'm like, still love you guys, don't want to be with you in the city.
I am perfectly happy visiting all my friends up in
Same.
New York.
Exactly. For like a week, no more.
Yeah, and also, frankly, I'm too old now to be sleeping on couches. So
oh, yeah, no.
just like
I literally was just having this conversation where I was like, my back hurts. Yep. Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned, and in your bio, you used to be an editor, and now you're a literary agent. Can you give us a sort of like history of your career in the publishing industry? Oh.
Sure. Oh my gosh. Let me think about that. Yeah. So I was an editor. First, I was at Scholastic, and then I went to Disney Hyperion, and now I'm a literary agent. And honestly, I feel like it was just that thing, which I think a lot of people talk about. It's like you have mentors in a certain area, and then a job opens up, and you take the job because, like, you know, I think for me, a lot of people grow up knowing the name Scholastic, and so for me, it was like, why would you not take this job? and then I think it got to a point where I was like, okay, I need to like move and like get to a place where I can like acquire books. And so I moved to Disney. And then I just realized that like I didn't want to be an editor. I think I really enjoy working with authors. Okay, so like actually when I left, I thought I was gonna leave publishing forever because I was like, done, goodbye. And I actually was like gone for like 6 months, which I know doesn't seem like that much, but for me, I was like, goodbye. And people kept like emailing me, and I was like, no, I do not want a job. Like, I'm never coming back. And then like by month like 4, I was like, oh, I actually really miss working with authors. And I had been doing freelance editing, but I just was like, it's not the same. And then that's kind of how it happened. You know, I had people who were like, you should come talk to this person who runs his agency, or I had friends who ran agencies. And I just kind of started talking to people, and I ended up where I am now. And I feel like it's honestly like the best case scenario. Like, I love it, you know, because I get to work with writers, and then I also write myself, but I feel like I always have seen myself as like both a publishing professional as well as a writer. So it was weird not being both, and not weird in like a freeing way. It was weird in like I feel like I'm not actually like doing the work I want to do. Also, it was a little weird being like founder of People Color in Publishing and having left publishing. Yeah, you know, honestly, I think which my biggest thing is, I think now what I especially talk a lot about is like how I don't live in New York, but obviously, you know, I have the connections necessary to not live in New York. But I feel like not living in New York has shown me especially just how ridiculous it is that everyone has to live in New York. And I feel like there are so many people personally that I meet who I'm like, wow, you'd be a really great editor. I wish you lived in New York, you know, which is like really dumb kind of, because you're like, there's so many people now that I get to meet. I've gone to there's a really big writer scene in Austin, and I'm just like, wow, there's so many of you who could like work in publishing, but you'd have to move to New York, and you can't afford to move to New York. I'm sorry. You know, and people are like, oh, well, how'd you do it? And I was like, okay. And I always have to say, like, disclaimer, I was an editor first. So all the editors that I know, like you know, it's like, it's not lucky, but it's also like, they're all like colleagues and friends of mine, you know? So it was much easier for me to jumpstart as an agent and sell books to editors, because I used to like go to drinks with these people and like hang out with them. So it's like, I know their tastes very well. And I don't think, you know, it's a whole story, but I feel like the industry could really do a better job at figuring out a way to get people to like, who aren't in New York, to work in publishing, because I think it's just so easy now, you know. It's so easy.
It is easy, but you know, I have two thoughts about this too, because you know, I was an editor.
Yeah, no,
I
would say I would love to. Yeah.
And first of all, they don't pay you a living wage.
God.
They really don't. That's a huge problem. They don't pay you a living wage, and I don't think the starting salary has materially changed in the 10
someone
years.
did a study on it, and it's literally gone up like $2,000.
Yeah.
Oh boy, I actually did the math, and I was accounting for a 2% inflation. So my starting salary was $33,000, and that was in 2009.
That's the same salary.
Yeah, 2009. Right? And so if it was increasing just, we'll say, a standard 2% inflation every year to account for the quote standard of living, which $33,000 in 2009 wasn't enough to live in New York then, was basically, I was like, well, really, the starting salary just based on 2% inflation really should be around $49,000 now. And that's not what they pay. And that's ridiculous. And that's not a livable salary in New York anyway. Really, your starting salary should be around $60,000. That's just an entry level, but they're not going to pay that. That's the biggest problem with New York right now. And the other thing is, it's like, so I lived there for 10 years. I went to college there, and then I stayed. And working as a publishing professional, there is something to be said about the face-to-face time.
No, I mean, that's the thing I would say. Like, it's like the flip side where people are like, you did. And I'm like, okay, but the face-to-face I had is the reason why I'm able to do this now.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree that a lot of the connections I made, a lot of the credibility I had built up was because I had literally put in the FaceTime with a lot of these people. Usually drinking at bars, but
No, but they still know your face. Like, so when I send them a submission, they're like, oh, I remember that time X happened. It's like, even people who I've met once, it's like, because you had that important face-to-face, they remember you,
Yeah.
That's the same.
It's hard, I think, because you could still, it's a little bit the same on the author side when you think about it, how expensive it is to travel around the country. But a lot of these conferences and festivals are, I think, where if you're going to invest any money, that's really the place to do it, is to attend these conferences and festivals, because the face-to-face time is very, very important.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean,
how much do you feel like that has been worth it for you? Because I don't know, I feel like I talk to a lot of friends about this, and people are always like, how do you really know which ones pay off in the long run? I feel like I have some ideas about which ones maybe pay off more, but I don't know.
I have ideas, but that was because I was in the industry before I became a writer, or an author rather. And then I think it's important sort of in the lead up to your debut year and during your debut year. And after that, it's because when you're in your debut year, you don't have those connections. You don't have the support network yet. And so going to a lot of these places is finding other people who are basically in the same part of your career as you. And that camaraderie is very, very important to get it through this business, because it's very lonesome otherwise. It's generally just you. So, finding the festivals to attend to, honestly, just go to the ones that are local to you. I think that's probably the easiest, things that are within a driving distance. Networking is something that it has a bad word. Like it doesn't have good connotations attached to it, but networking is basically just seeing people and showing up as a human being. And that's it, and I think that's important. And if you have the discretionary income, which that's a whole other discussion, but if you have the means to do so, I think then maybe traveling to some of the bigger festivals like Y'all Fest, Y'all West, if those are nearby. But really, there are certain, like, I think trade shows, things like ALA, Midwinter, any of the sort of trade shows, BEA, things like that, I don't think are worth it for authors to send
they're
themselves.
also so I've just like been on the floor and met so many authors who were debuts who were like basically having panic attacks. It's like, it's not worth it. It's like they don't know anyone. They're so lost. They have like one panel. They're like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. I'm like, why are you here?
Yeah, anything that's reader focused, I think, is worth going to. But so I guess, so BookCon, which is the reader part of BEA, is, I think, worth going to. But the BEA itself is really a trade show. It's for the publishing industry people, so it's
Yep.
very
The
industry
reason why I
focused.
go to BA is to see all my friends.
I would attend BEA basically just to drink. I'm just revealing how much I drank in my 20s here, but you know. All right, so then why don't we kind of move on? We have a couple more questions for you, Patrice. So for our viewers, the vision of people of color in publishing is the diversification of the book publishing industry until the people of color are not only recruited but retained, until the staff of publishing houses in the United States is as racially and ethnically diverse as the world we live in. So can you tell us a little bit more about the organization and what it does in order to achieve that vision?
Yeah, so I think just in general, the best place to learn more information, because I'm going to say a lot of things, is pocnpublishing.com. And we have a newsletter. I was just signing up for it. But I think one of the biggest things is like we really try to, so there's an e-board, and there's a group of us who are on the e-board, and we all represent different aspects. So there's like, you know, publicists, literary agents, editors, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things we really try to work on is like you said, so it's about recruitment, which honestly, I think is like, okay, so I don't think it's easy to recruit people into publishing, but I do think for us, that has been the easiest thing because especially now we have a lot of publishers and presses who will reach out and say, hey, like, you know, job thing, you know, we've gotten like 40 people plus people jobs since 2016. So it's just, I feel like one of the biggest things that's been the easiest for us, it's been a goal, has been to, you know, how I think a lot of like, because of like the Columbia publishing courses and all these things that oftentimes have, you know, middle class white people in them. For us, it's been like, how can we create our own networks? Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think we've done a really great job at that. I think a lot of the jobs we get, you know, we have just a really great referral thing. We're really great at getting people jobs, et cetera, et cetera. The biggest thing, as we know, because of the PW Publishers Weekly studies that come out each year, is retention, because a lot of people it's not just us, you know, there's Latinx in publishing, there's really diverse books, there's representation matters, there's a lot of different programs for that have like internship programs and all these different things to get people into publishing, but a lot of people don't stay, you know, they leave. I feel like one of the best examples is like when I was an editor and I left, I was getting dinner with a friend of mine who's an editor of color, and she was like, oh, you know, I got this submission from this agent, and this agent was like, et cetera, was talking about it. And she was like, yeah. And she was like, oh my God, it's amazing. How has no one bought this? And she was like, well, the only people who understood it and who like offered revisions on it were the 3 people last year who left. And it was like 3 editors of color, you know? And so she was like, so you're like one of the only ones left in children's books. And it was just one of those things where I was like, oh, I didn't realize that to everyone else, 3 of us. So for me, it was like, I left because I need to leave, but I didn't realize that like 3 of us left in the same year, you know? And so I think it's that kind of thing of like, okay, what is going on? Because I only realized it after the fact when people came up to me and were like, hey, I just noticed, is everything okay? I feel like, what's going on? I was like, what are you talking about? I just need to leave. I'm gonna write full time. And then people were like, well, you left and this person left and this person this. So it's like, how do we fix that? And I think a lot of times, at least from what I hear, sometimes people just aren't in a good spot where they're at. So it's like, okay, the hardest thing is like when you're at a mid-level position, you have 2 choices, right? You're either going up where you are, and you're like, say you're an editor, you're associate editor, and you're like, I want to be like a senior editor, executive editor, have my own imprint one day. Or you're an associate editor and you're like, I think I don't want to be an editor like me. I want to be an agent, or I want to do marketing. And I know a lot of people like that. That's a lot of people's problems. And I think that's a really critical point when you realize when you're at that associate like mid-level point and you're like, oh, I want to either switch or move up. And suddenly it's much harder, you know? I think people focus on how hard it is to be an assistant and get promoted. And it is definitely hard, but I think it's even harder to get to the senior level, you know? And so
I agree. The hardest jump is probably from associate to editor. I think.
Oh, it's impossible.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And
I mean, you can be an associate for years. People talk about assistants being, but associate, I mean, I know people who've been associate editors for like 5 years.
Yeah, one of my closest friends, and she's an executive editor now, but when we were, it's funny because I tend to think of people who publishing in classes. Like
Yeah.
everyone tends to start at like assistant level
Mhm,
together, and then
mhm.
everybody sort of kind of slowly gets promoted or whatever.
Mhm.
Right around associate level, though, you start to see a little bit of a spread in terms
Absolutely.
of promotion, people leaving, etc. And that jump from associate to editor, especially if that is what you want to do, is
Mhm.
very, very, very hard for a number of reasons. First of all, the pay is still terrible. Like, I feel like a lot of the
Well,
retention
also,
problems
yep,
would be solved
with the
if they
pay.
got paid.
I know one of the biggest things I remember is that, so I was an associate editor, and just I think just like the place I worked, but in general, like I I love negotiating money, but I also, the way I talk about it is like my college like really really worked on training us how to negotiate our salary, and so I got paid like 50,000 about, and then I had a friend who had the same position as me who got paid basically 40,000, and we were the same level, and to me that's
Yeah, they
wild
can
because you can
certainly
be
afford
10.
more.
Exactly. And it's like, how are you paying someone? I mean, that's also the problem. It's like you could be paid like so much. And I think 50,000 was when I just was like, oh, I can live finally, So, and in New York. And it's like, so of course people can't make it on like 40, 30,000.
I think the other issue of retention is the problem of mentorship, because
Yep.
I
Yep.
remember being there, and a lot of people at the assistant level are women.
Yep.
And at the associate level, the few men that I knew in publishing tended to start getting promoted faster. And it
Oh
wasn't
my God. Wildly.
necessarily
Like
because,
wildly.
yeah,
I knew people who
wildly, and
started
it wasn't
associate.
because of merit.
I blinked and they were a senior editor, and I was like,
And it's because often they have a in-house champion
yep.
who is
Yep.
going to promote them. It's either their boss or it's somebody
Yep.
that they know well, and it's generally another older white man who is basically fast-tracking all these people through.
Mhm.
And then there's like this narrative attached to this younger editor too, of this like wunderkind or this
Yep.
enfant
Yep.
terrible, and it's very
Mhm.
frustrating because even if their books don't do well, they can, for some reason, they're able to spend a lot of money on a book. Whereas, a lot of other women and people of color at the associate level were still like basically fighting tooth and nail for every single penny on their P&L to have that signed off. And I found that incredibly frustrating, being that was so much of the discouragement that comes from retention here, is that there is no mentorship, really, not the same way. Pay is abysmal for the most part, and I was being paid fairly decently when I left, but even so, my starting salary was actually higher than most of my other peers because I negotiated, and I had a champion as well who was an older white man. So it's a lot of all this together that I think recruitment is getting easier because there are more efforts, not
Well, also,
just
I
by
think
your
people
organization.
feel like that's the public thing. Like, to me, when I talk, I mean, we get so many requests from people about recruitment, and like that's what they want to put their money towards, like for them, getting like a person of color in a position is like gold. But then they all leave, and I feel like one of the things we've been talking about is like, so we do all these like professional development panels throughout the year. We have things on like just like switching careers. We have panels on, pitching yourself for a conference, all these different types of things. And then we also have a mentorship program, which has been phenomenal. It just started last year. It was like 12 people or something like that, and it got like 2 people jobs. It was really great. And I think one of the biggest things, so right now we're filing for nonprofit, and is like we really want to expand our programming. But we had I like led the team in a very honest conversation at the end of last year. And I was like, listen, like, we're all volunteers. We basically had the whole team. A lot of the team rolled off, and we got a lot of new people, which I thought was great. But it's the thing where it's like, I feel like publishers aren't really invested. Like I've taken lunches with publishing people who I know who've been like, oh, we want to like sponsor you for a panel. And I'm like, that's like not really helpful in the long run. Like we've been doing these panels since 2016. Since it's like
it's the same panel over and over again.
Ask like a friend who heads up an agency for money to do a panel. I don't need you to like sponsor a panel, but like they just want their name on something, you know? And I'm like, what if you sponsored a program that like got people long-term into publishing? Like I was like, oh, I mean, we had a whole town hall with We Need Diverse Books because they do this phenomenal internship program in which they basically give people like a Metro card and then also MTA card, and then they also give people like, you know, a fully funded internship. Right? It's a stipend as well. And so we were all talking about it. I was talking to their executive director, and I was like, you know, this is just phenomenal. And I think it's like there's so many ways that we have talked about we get partner, but it's just like I think it's like there's just no from higher ups, like the people who care are the higher ups who care are all people of color, and it's like people like BBA and Andre Davis Pinckney who have gone through a lot, and they were like, yeah, you can come to our office, we'll do all this stuff. And I'm like, but it's like there's like 3 of you guys. You know?
There's not enough. There's not enough at that level. And there's a lot of, I remember that so much of the exhaustion, I actually left publishing for other reasons. Like we moved to North Carolina and everything. But at that point, it was getting very exhausting being one of 3 people of color in an editorial board.
Oh God.
It is emotionally draining. That's
so
really
bad.
Hard. Yeah. And I can only imagine, like, you know, Andrea Davis Pinckney being one of the few, you know, people at her level, and how just draining it must be for her. And to have all that extra time, it's just this is the problem. It's you know, like a quote pipeline problem, right? You can get a lot of people in, but can you keep them? Can you keep them in long enough to affect real change? And that's an issue.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's like I've talked with me. It's like the reason why I'm still in publishing is because of Andrea. Like it's like when I was miserable as an assistant, she was around the corner, and she used to like bring me to her office all the time. It would be like, you can't leave, you know? And I think I would have left a long time ago. Absolutely. And I think that I kind of realized I was like, you know, a lot of people don't have this kind of mentorship. And I think it's weird because I think it's really great when people come up to me at events when I'm in New York and they're like, thank you for founding this org. It gave me the network I needed. And I just kind of feel like I'm happy for you. But like long term, is this really doing anything? Because I just feel like I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you have friends now. So like I feel like I'm glad that we've connected you to people. I'm glad you have our panels. But I'm sorry that like your boss still doesn't care. You know, it's kind of like your boss who promotes you is like the problem. And
it's not your peers.
Yeah, it's not your peers. Yep. Yeah, for sure. I know. Sorry, it's like so a very serious conversation, but
yeah. Well, I do want to ask one question because I know people were kind of like curious about this, switching gears a little bit. And so some people were wondering, just what are you looking for in your submissions?
Oh gosh, that's like it's like my hardest question because
I know.
no, because the reason why is I feel like I'm very I've always been like this. Actually, as an editor, that was kind of my problem. I am all over the place taste wise, and the way I explain my taste is that I like the gummy bear vitamins of books. So I feel like things that I can imagine being packaged like in a really like fun way, like it looks really appealing, but it's good for you. So I think like
that's a great way to describe it, though. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, that's the only way. So like when I think so I acquired The Serpent's Secret. So I think like that's a book that's like super fun, really great commercial packaging. I can only think of books, and when I'm reading submissions, queries, I only ever think of how they're going to look finished. It's just like the editor in me, like I can only ever imagine like how it's gonna look on a shelf. And so,
I was the same way as an editor. I was like, can I see it on a bookshelf? How can I market this? How can I literally place this in the market? That was the way I thought too.
Well, I feel like it also helps, like, you know, in terms of writing, because I think even when I'm talking to my clients, like for me, I have to be able to be like, well, your book's going to be compared to this book and this. It's like I have to know, even when I'm working with my clients where I'm editing to, like I feel like I have to know the market. And so for me, like a book like The Serpent's Secret, where it's like really fun, super cute, but you read it, it is very fun and super cute, but it's also like about immigration and immigrants and like what it feels like to be like, to have lost culture. And so for me, I really like books that, there's this scene I love in that book where she's like has to go through like customs, but it's a fantasy world, so it's not really customs, but it's customs, and I think the idea of like going through that as an immigrant and being like, having to feel like you don't belong and getting all these questions about your identity. And that's the kind of book I feel like all my clients have. I feel like that's kind of the stuff they write, It's like one of my clients is Kwame Mambala, who does Tristan Strong. And it's the same way. That book is like very much like a fantabulous like contemporary fantasy book, but it's also about a kid who lost his friend and overcoming loss and feeling like you're weak emotionally and how you become strong. And I think, so for me, I feel like obviously middle grade. I love middle grade. I think that's a really big thing I'm looking for. I think anything with a great voice, I do everything, just not picture books. I will automatically delete it. I give so many picture
books are hard.
Yes, and I'm like, my boss at Disney was a picture book goddess, and so I know they're not my thing. Like they're not my thing. I'm never. It's like if a client wants to do one, they're really hard. They're
very hard. They're hard. Like I always used to say to people that the younger you write, the harder it gets.
No one believes that though. I feel like people are like,
yeah, no one believes it.
I get queries that like, I wrote a middle grade novel. Like, yeah, my daughter was reading this book and I was like, or, I was like, I can do this. Or, hi, this is the next Harry Potter. And I'm like, okay, delete. It's not, it's like, if you're comping your book to Harry Potter,
you're not well read enough in what you're trying to write.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly
definitely.
that.
I feel like, very voicey, character-driven stuff. Not, I think I do a lot of rounds of edits with my clients. So I think, my whole thing is like, it needs to be a phenomenal character.
This is actually a question that we had written down before, but I wanted to segue a little bit into the conversation about comps. What are your thoughts necessarily on using comps in a query?
So funny. I was just having this conversation, not about in a query, but about, it's similar. So like when I was an editor, I acquired a lot of books that were kind of compless because they were like, it was like, I acquired books that were like, it's like The Cruel Prince, but it's not because it's like very gay and all this stuff. So it's actually not that, but it was like the closest thing to it. And it's always interesting to me how I think as an editor, I was forced to use comp titles to talk to my team, and talk
for
about
sales, it's really useful to have a comp.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for me, I think I'm someone, and all agents are very different with this. I like skim a query letter and then I read the pages. I care much more about voice. And I personally feel that it's my job to come up with the comp titles. So I feel like, I'm like, you just write your book. If I signed you, I probably already have like ideas about comps. There are definitely like instances where people, like I sign people and they're like, it's like, this meets this. And I'm like, oh my God. Like it's like I had an author who writes contemporary fantasy, and she was like, yeah, it's kind of like Shea Earnsaw's books, and it's like comps like that. And I read her books and I was like, this is a fantastic comp. And she was like, it's like this, but instead of set here, it's set here. And I was like, this is like 100% like exactly what it is, But I think it's a great shorthand that helps your books, but only if it's accurate, because I am someone, especially having been an editor, where I used to get comps all the time that I'd be like, oh my God, that's my favorite series. Or I just read a lot of books, So I think sometimes I'm like, maybe it's better for you not to comp it to that series if it's actually not like that, because it almost hurts you. I come in with a preconceived notion. Yeah.
I actually, because when I was an intern at a literary agency before I became an editor as well. And I was basically like, it was actually far more effective if the person said it would appeal to readers of blank.
Rather than I love that.
As opposed to it's like X meets Y, which what you take away from a certain title may not be what this person would take away from a certain title. but I feel like it's appealing to readers of this type of book or this author or whatever, I think is actually a little bit more useful. And it actually helps, at least I remember when I was working in editorial at this point, it actually helps sales, because then sales is like, oh, I know how to reach this reader. I know how to reach this segment of the market. But I actually don't think it's important for a querying author necessarily to come up with comp titles, because honestly, your agent probably has better ones anyway. So
no, I think the only thing the one book I always think of is The Selection, which was comped as The Hunger Games meets The Bachelor, which I think no matter how you interpret it, you kind of get The Selection. And so
no, it's true. It's true.
Right? Like, I think for me, that I was like, that's like an amazing comp. So unless your comp title is like that good, I think for fans of it's almost better, especially because I feel like I think a lot about how an agent sells a book in to editors, and then how editors talk about their book to their team. So for me, it's like, if you comp your book as like for fans of this person, and then like you go to JJ and you're like, JJ blurred my book, and then JJ loves your book, then it's like, oh wait, for fans of Winter Song, and it's like already, you have like, it's like, so I feel like I kind of love that, because you automatically can get, I love it when you can get like the published author to say what you want someone to say about your book.
Yes.
When it's like, you're like, oh, I feel like we pitched the book like this, and then you get someone who's like, it's like this, what's this? And you're like, thank you. So yeah, I feel like for fans of is like really great, because it gives your publisher an automatic list of like, here we go. This is it.
This is how I'm going to market it. This is who I'm going to reach out. This is,
well,
it helps
like, like you said, it's like, your type of book, and I think especially for me with a lot of clients who like for fantasy, it's like, it shows that specifically exactly what type of fantasy you write, in a market where there's like a lot of different things. Like, what exactly is your book like? I hate it when there's comps where like people they're like, I see this all the time, where it's like every big fantasy author. And I'm like, yeah, well, I've read all those books and they're all very different from each other.
Yeah, there's nothing in common here.
I'm like, they're all
except
women.
Money, maybe.
Yeah. It's like they made a lot of money and they're women. Okay. Great.
All right, well, we are pretty much out of time, but I have one more question that I ask all my guests, and I gave you a little warning about it. And so I want to make sure we get that in before I let you go. And that is, what is the most important book you've read and why?
Oh gosh, right. Okay, so mine is like not something, and I can give another one, but like mine is not, I don't even know if this book is in print. So that's why I'm like, when I was younger, I read this book called Yoruba Girl Dancing by Simi Bedford. And it's basically about this African girl who goes to school in England. And growing up, I went to schools that were often predominantly white. And it's just about her life. Like, she goes to school in England and she's like super depressed at first, and then she finds herself. And I've read that book like 50 times. Like, and I mean, like, probably actually, because for me, like, it was like my lifeblood. Like, I feel like I read it all the time as like a, you're going to be okay kind of thing. I feel like that was like a book I really loved. And then I'll add a second, which is that, but it's just like, it's like for me, the other things, and it's not a book, it's Madeline Miller's books. Like, I feel like,
I love her.
Yeah.
I
like,
love her stuff so much.
I will say I really love Circe, and I think that's her best book. She's only written 2, but I feel like it's.
I was going to say,
yeah, no,
what have I missed?
2. But the Song of Achilles really was like her book for me, because I think Circe is phenomenal. Yeah, it's like I think everyone, and maybe I'm just a little wary of people.
Spot in my heart for Song of Achilles, and I love Circe too, but I was like,
and I feel like everyone was like, Circe, it's a feminist, like, it's like a feminist manifesto, and I was like, okay, great. But the Song of Achilles, it's like, I love books when you know exactly how the characters have to end up.
Yeah, and
you just get tortured, like, how Achilles,
the
how
dramatic irony,
exactly. And it's a beautiful book, and it made me think a lot, forever about craft and how one pushes themselves to write a book and the things you can do with structure. And I think it's honestly one of the best books ever written. Like, I think it's just a phenomenal book, you know?
It is one of the best. Brilliant. I agree. It's one of the best books.
There's no one I've known who reads that book and doesn't cry. I feel like if you don't get like emotions after reading it, I don't want to know.
Yeah. It's like, we can't be friends.
We can't be friends. Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
All right, Patrice, thank you so much for joining us tonight. For our viewers, make sure you check out A Phoenix First Must Burn, coming out March 10th. And also her website and Twitter is in the description right now, so you can go find her and find out more about her there. Thank you, Patrice. Have a good night.
Awesome. Have a good night. Bye.
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 All right. So we have a couple of things that we're going to do before we say good night. Well, first, Ebony had a comment I wanted to address up here. Sarah, is that a new cup? It is not. I got it at the same time as all the others, but it has 4 faces, so you might have only seen one face before. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Oh, so audio of the book of the week. It's time for audio book of the week, which, if you haven't watched before, is a segment that I do because I like audiobooks and it goes no deeper than that. So my audiobook for this week is One of Us Is Next by Karen McManus. It's a sequel to the bestseller One of Us Is Lying. Dangerous Gossip returns to Bayview in the form of a truth or dare game. And this one features a new cast, but you still see the original cast from the first book from time to time, and they play into some of the story. And the audiobook has a different narrator for each POV character, which always helps me keep track in the kind of twistier books like these, because it does have those 3 different point of views. So check it out if you haven't already. And I really enjoyed one of the narrators. It was the narrator who does Knox. I hadn't heard his voice before. I don't right now.
I'm one of those people who actually do follow narrators from audiobook to
I do
audiobook.
for sure. Yeah.
So I'm always curious, like, oh, who's great? You know, so can I see? This is like a small aside, but there's an audiobook narrator, Steve West, and he does a lot of YA titles, and he has a rather distractingly sexy voice, actually. And I looked up and see what other books he'd done, and he'd done a bunch of romance novels as well. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can. I think I just blush, like head to toe, be blushing if I have to listen to Steve West narrate some romance novels.
Yeah, there was one. I was offered a book from a publisher because, since I write for Book Riot, they'll send me lists of audiobooks, and the narrator was, oh my gosh, what's his name? Thorin Oakenshield.
Richard Armitage.
Yes. And I saw his name listed there. I was like, okay, I'll listen to it. I don't even care. I didn't even know what the book was.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah.
I don't know what it's about. I'll just listen anyway.
Yeah. And then, and it happens in YA a lot. I have some of my favorite narrators like Bonnie Turpin and Kim My Guess and Emily Wazeller. And if I see their name on a book, I'll download it. I don't care.
Yeah.
Really
I'm very similar about my favorite narrators too.
Yeah.
Personally, my absolute favorite for audiobook narrators of all time is actually Jenny Lavoie. She does the Diviners books by Libba Bray, and she's scarily good. So
yeah. Yeah, I really enjoy more Quirk too. She does Gail Carriger's Finishing School series, and she did Gideon the Ninth. That was really good.
Yeah, sounds great.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're gonna go to our viewer poll, and I do have to. I may fumble a bit because of the restarts and stuff. I don't have my window already shared, so I'm gonna have to add it, and we'll see how this goes. Adding it live. There, cool. Okay, that worked. So the question was, what element do you usually start writing with? Plot, characters, setting, theme. And it looks like a lot of people overwhelmingly start with characters, 65%, about 18% plot, 10% setting, and 6.4% theme. So what about you, JJ? How do you usually start a story?
I will have to agree with the vast majority of people here and say I also start with character. A while back, I think this was for a pub crawl thing, I said that I think most books need 3 elements. They are plot, premise, character.
Mm-hmm.
And you sort of need 2 of the 3. to kind of really get started into writing a book, you can have a character and the plot, or you can have the plot and the premise. And the premise is not setting necessarily. It's just the hook or the very basic one sentence premise to your book. You can have the plot and the premise, or you can have the premise of the character and then figure out what the plot is. But you sort of need two of the three. For me, the thing that comes easiest is character, and so that's generally where I start. But generally, for me, premise and character kind of come at the same time. And then I'm terrible. I'm really, 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 really bad at plotting. So that's what takes the most amount of work.
Yeah. I'm kind of similar. So I usually start with like a premise or a concept, and then I start thinking about the character. I was talking about this with someone on Twitter in the comments of this poll actually, who both fits with the premise but also will challenge the premise. And then I start developing that, and that's all happening in my head. Like I haven't written anything down yet, and I just kind of let it simmer for a while. And then when I start writing, I just figure out the plot as I go along, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. There's actually a lovely quote from It's the Golden Compass by Philip Pullman, where he talks about Lyra having an idea, and she knew it was like the way of ideas, like soap bubble. You just didn't want to look at it directly lest it burst. So she just lets it sit there and kind of bubble away for a while. And I feel the same way, where if I have a premise and a character, I don't work on it so strongly. It's all kind of percolating at the back of the brain as I'm running errands or going to the gym or whatever. And there's a certain point where I feel like I've thought about it enough that I can start writing. And for me, that's generally when the first line shows up. And that's like, every writer has their like weird little quirks or superstitions. And mine is I cannot write unless I have the first line of the book. And I literally cannot move forward. If the first line is wrong, I have to start all over again. So that's kind of where mine is. But that's like, I feel like I know I've thought about it, or it's been kind of simmering away long enough when the first line shows up, and then I can start writing from there.
Yeah. And sometimes it just happens at like random times. Like you see someone on the street and it sparks something. Or I actually had a little bit of epiphany last week when I was getting a massage, which is weird. And then I just kept thinking about my story, and I was like, wait, I'm not enjoying this massage at all because I'm just thinking. I had to like stop myself. Yeah. Oh, Ebony said she's reading Red, White, and Royal Blue. Thanks for the recommending.
Oh, I love that
the
book.
audio of the week a while back. Yeah. It was a nice escape for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I actually start to look for that more and more in my fiction these days. I just need something fun. And not that it can't have its moments of seriousness or anything like that, but I just need something that I know will unequivocally end happily. And that's just basically what I need.
Yes, I agree. Let's see, what do we got left? Oh, the quote of the week. This is the last thing we have today. So I'm going to pull that up. And the quote that's on the screen is actually a short version of the quote. So I'm going to read the full one. You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read. It was books that taught me that the things that tormented me most were the very things that connected me with all the people who are alive, who had ever been alive. And that is from James Baldwin. And when I was looking through quotes, I saw this one, and I felt like a really deep connection to it,
He's a fantastic writer. So.
Oh yeah, he is. All right, so that is it. JJ, we have your website and your social media info down below. But if you want to let us know about anything you have coming up that we should be looking out for.
No, nothing in particular. In March, I will be at the Pittsburgh Bookish in the Berg Festival, but it's mostly me just writing and thinking about when we are going to announce the publication date of my next book, which has been a while coming. Let's just say writing since 2016 has been very, 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 very difficult. But
I know. Same. Yeah,
yeah.
I actually sent my book to my agent last week, and it's been a while, and I was like, did she forget? Like I've been gone so long. I haven't turned anything in a while.
Yeah. So yeah, no, just my socials there. I don't really post much of anything importance on social media really these days. So, but you can be there if you want to hear all my thoughts about the new Cats movie, because that's generally what I talk about right now.
Awesome. I was actually had a date with two of my coworkers to see it on New Year's Eve. We were
Mm.
going to start 2 hours earlier at the bar and then see it. And I got very, very sick, and so I still haven't seen it.
What is it that I think it was like someone had tweeted that the Cats they appreciate that Cats was not so bad it's good, it's so bad it's eldritch. And that about sums it up, really. It's a movie made entirely of bad decisions, but they all kind of come together in this gloriously entertaining whole. So if you guys like bad movies like I do,
Yeah, I do.
and are also a musical theater fan like I am, I do highly recommend Cats, and
Yeah.
maybe go see it with your theater friends, because you sort of need someone to be in the trenches with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I have like a group of friends that I often watch bad movies with. It's like a thing. But one of those friends is actually the buyer for the library, and so she informed me that she had ordered DVDs of Cats, so we have those coming in soon. So
Oh.
we'll probably just wait for that. Yeah.
You should host a viewing party at the library. I'm just
Oh.
saying, man. Like
We'll see if we
a
have rights to
midnight showing of Cats is all I want in my life. Something like Rocky Horror Picture Show. Absolutely, I'd be there.
Yeah. I wish they'd let me do a midnight showing. That'd be awesome. All right, JJ, thank you so much for
Well,
joining
thank you for
me.
having me.
And everyone go follow JJ on Twitter and check out her books because they're awesome. And I'm gonna close out the show. So have a good night, JJ.
Good night. Bye.
All right, so if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like and subscribe right down there, and so you don't miss another episode. Also, tell your friends, because that is how people find out about shows like this. And there's also a link down below to subscribe to email updates. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters. Like I say this every episode, but I just really support y'all, and I mean, I just really appreciate all of your support. I'm sorry, I've had such a long day. I've been forgetting words all day. Yeah, I just really appreciate y'all's support so much, and it means so much to me that you have stuck with me since October, many of you. So thank you again, and you can find a link to that in the description. And then you can find the social media for our guests in the description, along with the PubTalk Live social media. So all kinds of social connections. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Oh yeah, in 2 weeks, I should mention that we have Erica Wright is going to be my guest co-host, and Alex Segura is going to be our special guest. So make sure you check that out, because that is going to be awesome. I've been trying to get Alex on for a while, and we finally got his schedule to work. So I'm super excited that he's going to be on, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.